And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Well, Tuesday starts off with a lot of IFR on the graphic here, especially out over the Bering Sea into the western interior, with areas of IFR covering much of central and southern Alaska. Another big area up there over the Brooks Range North Slope, and improving out here out toward the western Aleutians. IFR North Gulf Coast and most of the Panhandle. For the afternoon, a pretty good improvement here over the interior with marginal VFR lingering over southern Alaska, VFR more widespread central northern interior, and improving conditions there for the Brooks Range. IFR North Gulf Coast and portions of the Panhandle with some leftover IFR here along the Yukon Delta coast and Nunivak Island, mostly off the coast there of the Kuskokwim Delta. And not too bad out to the west with the next front pushing more IFR into the western Aleutians there, heading in at least across Amchitka Island. And then for Tuesday, that moves eastward across Adak and then Atka Islands. Marginal VFR in between these two areas of IFR. Again, this redevelops here over the eastern Bering Sea, extends up to the Seward Peninsula, down to the Alaska Peninsula, and right on up into the Yukon River, at least the lower Yukon River Valley there, and up to the north, IFR for the North Slope and Arctic Coast, areas of IFR for the Upper Tanana Valley 40-mile country, right on down to the North Gulf Coast across the basin, and Panhandle, mostly IFR. And for Wednesday afternoon, again, improving pretty nicely here over the western part of the state, losing the IFR completely with some leftover marginal VFR for the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, lower Yukon Valley, and band there eastward here along the Alaska Range into the 40-mile country with some IFR over the mountainous terrain of the eastern Copper River Basin, areas of the Panhandle, some IFR, and now out west, big area of IFR, that storm system here covering the central western Bering Sea right on down into the Aleutians, almost up to Nikolsky. And for passes, Brooks Range on Tuesday for Anatuvik and Atigan, mostly VFR for both passes. Lake Clark and Merrill, marginal VFR. Marginal for Rainy, Windy, and Isabel, all looking marginal for the Alaska Range for the day on Tuesday. Mentasta, go VFR there. And Tanita, back to marginal. Portage, IFR, especially on the eastern entrance. Chilkoot and White, IFR. Freezing levels here, 2,000 feet up over the southern southeast coast, and then back down to the south, well south of the Alaska Peninsula, coming back up. And we're looking at 2,000 to 6,000 foot freezing levels there over the west central Aleutians. And moving on to icing, possibly some considerable moderate rime icing there north of St. Lawrence Island through the Bering Strait area. Better chance here with that next fairly potent front pushing some considerable moderate icing here into Adak, extending back westward to Shimianatu. And icing mostly staying off the coast here east of Kodiak Island over the Gulf of Alaska and to the south of the Kenai Peninsula, but some significant icing right in over the southeast coast. And for the jet stream, we've got westerly winds 33,000 feet blowing into the Panhandle there. Otherwise lighter over the interior down to Kodiak Island under a trough axis. And trough axis here extending from the Russian Far East right on down the west coast to just south of Kodiak. High pressure over the Aleutians, ridging northward between this trough and that ridge. Good northwest flow, 135 to 150 knots. And 3,000 or 9,000 feet. Northwest winds 35 to 45 knots here over the Bering Sea across the eastern Aleutians. Stronger winds ahead of that next system out there to the west, pushing into the far western Aleutians. And west winds at about 35 knots, mainly over the southern southeast coast. And at 3,000 feet up here along the western Arctic coast there, we've got some 40-knot easterlies. Otherwise, pretty light over the interior into the Gulf of Alaska. Stronger winds staying to the south here and blowing in toward the Queen Charlotte Islands. Out west, a big increase in the winds with that strong front, 70 to 75 knots ahead of that. And for turbulence, widespread considerable moderate turbulence there, Amchitka Island, westward to Shimianatu. And also possibly some isolated moderate turbulence, mechanical type turbulence here Point Lade down to possibly Kivalina, but more likely Point Holton Cape Lisburn area, and pretty smooth elsewhere.